Futures in Fundraising is presented by Alexander Haas. Alexander Haas, transforming institutions that transform lives.
All right, welcome to Futures in Fundraising, where we talk about leaders in the nonprofit field, about their careers, how they became successful, and we get advice from them for you about how you can be more successful. My guest today is Quinetha Frasier. She's CEO of MyPledger. Welcome, Q, to Futures in Fundraising.
Well, thank you for having me, David. Hello.
Hello. I wanted to ask you to tell everybody in our audience about MyPledger.
Absolutely. MyPledger is a fundraising software specifically designed to increase the amount of pledges collected. The software was developed literally in response to a request from a local nonprofit wanting at the time to measure the number of board members that were pledging to come to the event. So my co-founder, Layron Walker, about 5 years ago said, you know what, I think I can tinker a little something and figure out how to count the number of board members. Well, the next year they had a match. They had a match challenge from Delta. And they said, for every dollar you raise, we'll give you two if you guys can tell us who pledges towards your goal. And so they looked at Layron and they said, hey, Guy, can we also keep track of the people that will pledge money to this campaign? And he did. And that's how MyPledger was born. I joined the company as a co-founder and CEO 2.5 years ago. And what we've done since that time, oh, by the way, that organization raised over $220,000 that year using our software. What we have done with MyPledger and what we exist to do is we help organizations to eliminate the paper pledge card. And so when we attend we attend galas, fundraisers, or chicken dinners. I call them chicken dinners, David.
Rubber chicken dinners.
Oh, absolutely, yes. Instead of seeing that gorgeous pledge card on the table, or in addition to seeing that pledge card on the table, and your influencer gets up on the stage and says, David, don't you love my mission? Please donate tonight. Well, then you can pull out your cell phone, text into a phone number that MyPledger will provision for you, and you will make your pledge. Your pledge will appear on a big fancy screen, much like at the digital ball at our client Tech Bridge, and all of the attendees get excited and they are motivated to give in addition to the other attendees to reach their goal. That's also on the dashboard. The secret or the golden egg to our software, though, David, is the post-event automation. And we really, that's the one thing that I think distinguishes us in the marketplace, because once you make that pledge with your phone, we then will kick out and schedule a number of SMS texts, voicemail, and email reminders and thank yous. So for instance, our client, Ambassador Andy Young, it's really cool. You go to your chicken dinner and the next morning you get a phone call from Ambassador Young saying, thank you so much for joining me last night. Don't forget to click your link.
Don't forget to pay your pledge.
Right.
Very cool.
Yeah. So that's MyPledger. And what we're doing now, and it's an interesting time, because what we've learned is that a number of our customers really would like a integrative tool that not only manages the pledges, but also helps them to manage the silent auction, the event registration, and then now the digital live streaming. So at the chicken dinner that I don't want to attend because I know there's going to be rubber chicken, I can stay at home, watch the event live, and make my pledge by way of my couch and my fuzzy slippers.
Well, that's good. I think an occupational hazard probably for you and me is invitations to hundreds
oh my God
of such events.
Absolutely. You know that way. We see organizations like the UNCF, for instance, where
I used to work, by the way.
Really? I did not know that. Well, you understand and I call it the monumental move of the UNCF with the telethon, right?
Yep, absolutely.
And so what we would like to reintroduce into cyberspace primarily is the digital telethon, right? And it's a nickel and dime campaign, obviously. People aren't making $5,000 pledges on a digital platform. But for people who would have tuned into CBS and watched Lou Rawls talk about how important education was, I think that we really need a platform to be able to continue to communicate that message and collect more money.
So I've been to some events where I don't know if they were using your platform, but but a similar kind of thing where instantaneous pledging, as opposed to the old way it used to happen where you'd raise your paddle like you were bidding and they'd write down what you were going to bid. And then somebody had to follow up, or maybe they had your credit card on file and they just hit it right away. But I have been to events more recently where they have the big screens and the ledger's going up and it's showing, I don't think it showed the amounts pledged, but the names of the individuals, and then the tally board is going up and generates, just knowing in real time how much money is accumulating, I think inspires more people to give than the old paddle raise, and we really don't know how much we got and somebody's trying to add it up real quick.
Absolutely yes. Absolutely yes. In fact, the event, we have an event tonight with our client Honor Code, and when we began working with them, they were doing the paddle raise, and we said, you know what, we can sort of keep the paddle raise, we'll just digitize it. Yeah, because I mean the dollar amounts are the same, and the excitement, to your point, will be heightened when people can actually see their names and lights.
Well, and the follow-up piece is absolutely critical, because I think that's where the shortcoming was.
Absolutely,
and the capturing of contact information. One of the things we primarily do major gift fundraising consulting.
Right.
A lot of it around campaigns, but a lot of it not, just sustainable major gifts program. But one of the challenges with events that we always challenge our clients with is you need to be capturing contact information for people who are coming to your events. Otherwise, you have no opportunity to re-engage with them.
That's right.
If you did touch them.
That's right. That's exactly right. And David, you like me, we've been in this industry long enough to know that, your donor engagement strategy is the crux of your fundraising strategy. And I spent some time at United Way, and one of the things we struggled with our not major gifts strategy, but our individual donor strategy is how do we keep people engaged all year long, especially the burgeoning millennial, and less millennial now, just people who are on their phones all the time. Right?
And bombarded with information all the time.
And now email isn't even you can't even depend on email because people are inundated with.
I just accidentally deleted one and had to email somebody back and say, can you resend that to me? In a fit of cleaning up, it's
trying to say fit in your email. I mean, I'm down to checking it twice a day because it's just too much. And so what I think that, our platform and platforms like ours, because we're not the only shop in town, but platforms like ours gives us an opportunity to talk to people where they are throughout the funding cycle, and find a way to keep them in front of the mission. One of our customers, Tennessee State University, initially came to us because they wanted to use it for their homecoming. Same thing, obviously. Yeah. Tons of people. We need to capture them, which, obviously we do. We did that for Morehouse a couple years. But what we found, they couldn't get, to be honest, we couldn't, they just didn't have enough time to pull it together for homecoming. Because it was in late October. But we were able to do an end of the year solicitation. And it was very successful. They were surprised because their annual fund coordinator, and I know your guests know what an annual fund is, but that's their annual solicitation to their crowd of people. Right. And they had been receiving checks, through their traditional letter mailing campaign. But when they were able to interface on Facebook and bring in those classes, and we created a simple competition between those alumni years and created the dashboard that they could see on Facebook and see, it created an excitement that they didn't anticipate. And they raised literally, well, it's not hard to raise 130% more than the year over if you weren't using it, but they did, and they were so excited. And for me, it reminded me, as I said earlier, when I was at United Way and we're trying to figure out how to keep people engaged. I mean, social media is a really cool tool.
Yeah. So one of the things that we're working with some of our higher education clients on now is trying to create a culture of giving while students are still in school. So student campaigns, and an example might be the administration gives the student council a list of 5 or 6 projects they'd like to do. And maybe they're something that, depending on the size of the institution, maybe it costs $10,000 to do it. And the students all come together and fund it. And then while they're there, they experience the power of giving and see something come to fruition. But the way that has to work, given that we're largely dealing with 18 to 21-year-olds, is with a technology platform.
Absolutely.
This sounds like something that would lend itself very well.
I love it. I love that they're even thinking that way. Our system, our platform, is what's called a multi-tenant system, which means for those pre-alumni councils, or, to your point, the student organizations who are managing their own little $5,000 and $10,000 campaign. Our system allows for for a university to manage 10, 20, 50 of them that roll up into their overall. So if you set a goal of, if it's $100,000 for across all of the organizations, then they all can have their own little personal campaigns, their own little personal dashboards, phone numbers. And David, that the power of students raising money, they're blowing up. I'm not on social media that much. And I know on a college campus, what we found is that they're the real users.
Yeah. And they just don't, most college students don't really have a sense of the role that giving plays in the opportunities for education that they have.
Yes.
I'm just sort of here and I'm going through the motions. And what we're trying to do is teach them that it is philanthropy that causes some of these things around here to happen. And you can make one happen and do it now while you're still here. And then hoping that they keep that thought when they leave, and that they'll continue to give for
I'm
lifetime.
glad. I wish, and I have a personal commitment and now burden for historically Black colleges and universities, because I attended one. I attended Tuskegee. And one of the things that I found alarming was one of my good girlfriends finished Stanford. And she said, much like what you're describing, that they were trained to give before they graduated. They made the calls, like you said, they were engaged. And a lot of historically Black colleges and universities, we're having to now train them to do the same with their students.
All right, well, we're going to take a very short break. We will be right back with more. And when we come back, we're going to talk with Q about how she became passionate about the nonprofit sector to begin with. So we'll see you in a minute.
I came to Alexander Haas in 2005 after being the Director of Museum Advancement at the High Museum of Art here in Atlanta. I had been part of a very successful $130 million expansion campaign at the High, but had done consulting previously and had found that was really a true love of mine. So I took a small sabbatical, a couple of months, had some time to me, and then I was invited to join the firm here.
All right, we are back at Futures in Fundraising with Q Frasier, CEO of MyPledger, who's been telling us about the application and some of the work they've done to really enhance fundraising for nonprofits. I'd like to take this in a slightly different direction now, Q, if that's okay with you.
Sure, yeah.
So you brought up that your time at Tuskegee, and so it seems to me that you have some nonprofit work sort of in your DNA. So I'd like to know, what is it that brought you into the nonprofit work to begin with? You have a for-profit company, but most of us who have for-profit companies that serve the nonprofit sector, that getting into the for-profit company came after some other work, and it's we're usually even doing the for-profit work out of a passion for the sector, because let's face it, we're not getting rich at it, right?
My brother and my friend. Yes, you understand the struggle. Yeah, my dad is an AME pastor, so he would like to take the credit and say, well, you entered this because I actually not.
Dad, do not watch Futures in Fundraising.
I know. But I would say I went to Tuskegee with an idea that I wanted to be involved in the political process, because I wanted to see change in community. So I went and got a political science degree because I thought that's what I needed. I didn't know. But when I got there, I was actively involved in, everything related to, public administration and public policy. But it was when I interned at the White House in my junior year that I really became ingrained in funding, because I worked in the Office of Public Liaison for a summer for free. And that's where I got to really experience the relationship between the community venting their needs to a public space like the White House, and how that translated into policy sometimes that ended up back in the community. And so when I graduated, I said, I'm going to go work for HUD, because back in the day it was all this development HUD was doing.
Sure.
And I wanted to learn. I didn't know anything about it. But David, I ended up in Talladega, Alabama.
Okay, been there. Drove
through, right? Most people are driving through. Unless you love the super speedway or you happen to be at Talladega College, there's probably not a reason for you to be there. But at the time, I was asked to come and hang out for a little while in their institutional advancement office. A little while turned into 5 years. But that's where I was trained to be a development officer, trained to be a grant writer. I knew nothing of those things, but that's where I fell in love with it. And from that time in 2004, I had met so many people and organizations, because when you tell people you raise money or write grants, they always have a reason. Never have I said I was a grant writer and someone didn't say, I needed a grant for this. And so I started a firm. I started my firm back in 2004 called Firstborn Group, now titled Social Impact Advisor, with the sole focus of helping, people who wanted to fund their vision, to figure out how to do that. Okay. And so I did a number of work. I did a lot of workshops, a lot of grant writing, a lot of organizational development with nonprofits to sort of help them move the needle. That really has led me into diverse places in the philanthropic sector. As I said, for the first probably 9 years, I did all fundraising, grant writing, fundraising. But my career took a interesting shift back in around 2007, where I became knowledgeable about social enterprise and earned income models. And so I then started another company with a gentleman focused on helping social entrepreneurs. And those are just companies that have both a social and an entrepreneurial focus to raise capital. And in that work, David, is where I got hyper focused on things like data, like how do we know what we're doing? How do we know what our outcomes are? Because the financial industry requires those things. They're like, yeah, you're doing good, quote unquote work, but what does that mean?
Prove it.
Right. Prove it. And for me I'm sort of a geek when it comes to numbers and understanding what they mean. It gave me an opportunity to take what we know, right, around social missions and social work and then translate that into a world that doesn't understand what we do. They love Salvation Army, but they have no idea what that means. They love CARE, but they have no idea. And it gave me an opportunity. And here recently, my turn into technology really came. I did some work for TechBridge. They're a local nonprofit IT provider. And we went to the funding community and said, look, the work that TechBridge is doing is critical, because the work what technology is bringing to our sector is that opportunity to bring more efficiency to the work to organizations like the Atlanta Mission, who's ending homelessness. So
where I also worked.
Did you? Oh my God! You didn't happen to work with the current CEO?
No, I worked. I don't want to tell you
how many years
ago it was, but it was a long time ago.
I love them so good. Now you're my second favorite person. I got to say second behind Eric. But we went to the funding community and made the case for funding to support technology, and what that meant in our world is really operational support. And I continued to dig into that technology space to sort of think about how I could optimize my work, because what running an annual campaign is like. Oh. And when I worked with United Way, it was more of a major gifts focus, where, to be honest, technology still doesn't have a top role, because you got to do that the old-fashioned way. Yeah. But that led me to MyPledger, and it's really led my firm, Social Impact Investors, to a space where we want to raise lots of money, but we want to do it in a way that's measurable, that's transparent, and we want to do it in a way that really proves our work in the community.
So another thing we seem to have in common, and we seem to be stumbling on a lot of those, even though we just met, is we're both kind of data junkies.
Yes.
And so one of my favorite quotes is a quote from Mark Twain, who said, "First get your facts, then you can distort them all you want."
I love that. I've never heard that. Thank you. Gave me a gift.
So I use that a lot. But so data collection and analysis has really been a missing link in the nonprofit sector. I mean, corporations use analytics so much and so well, yes, but nonprofits just really haven't embraced it. So I wonder if you talk some about the use of data or the lack thereof and how that impacts the way nonprofits make decisions.
Oh my goodness. Absolutely. Yes. I will take two examples because I got to get on my soapbox about grant makers for a little bit, but I'll begin. I'm in good company.
We welcome soapboxes.
I know.
Fundraising.
I feel like I'm in good company. But data to a nonprofit, and I'm going to use a simple example like the Literacy Action organization, and their goal is to increase literacy. Understanding where, and we talk about evaluating where an individual is when they come in to their door. What's your current reading level? Are you reading at a third grade level or a high school level, right? And then applying their methodology or how they plan to solve that problem to help that person raise their reading level, right? Is a simple exercise. But for the funding world and for us out here who are donors, we like to know when that person leaves Literacy Action.
How did it change their life?
Absolutely. How did it change?
Or did it?
Better question. Did it change your lives? And so for us, data is an opportunity to prove that person gained success through the program. But it requires having the vehicle and the infrastructure to collect, compile, and then analyze that data so that at the end of the day, we can say, see, David, when the person came in, they were on a third grade level. I know that because I did a pre-work assessment. I put it in my CRM. We track that person through the system for 6 months or a year, whatever it takes. And then look, ta-da, a year later, this person has increased by this much because they did a post-program assessment that we recorded. And oh, by the way, I'm going to go find 50 more donors to help me bring 10 more people in here. And I want to share those numbers with the community so that they understand the scope of what we're doing. And what I've seen personally is that when an organization does a better job of framing their work in a quantitative way with the heart-wrenching story, that they're able to speak the language of our corporate donors, speak the language of some foundations who are becoming more astute. Now, to get on my short soapbox about foundations, the reason why a lot of nonprofits have not turned their focus to be data centric is because their funders aren't asking for it. I currently manage the Hull Fellows program for the Southeastern Council of Foundations, and it's great because I get to train their early career executives and help them to understand the trends and what we're talking about in philanthropy. And one of the things that one of the burning issues we talk through is data and measurements and how do we know we're doing a good job. And it's interesting to hear foundations say, what should we be measuring? Yeah. How do we know? Can United Way and 5 foundations create a plan for the community that we can measure against? And the answer is we'd love to do that, but how do we start? Like who puts the stake in the ground and says we have 1,000 homeless people and by God, we're all going to move them from homelessness to non-homelessness because we're going to solve mental health and substance abuse and those type of issues. But data is what we're talking about.
Well, I found a lot of funders tend to gravitate toward capital gifts for facilities and such because the measurable is so easy, right? So it's hard to measure impact on operating grants or program grants because the data is so lean. But if you give to a building, it gets built or it doesn't. It makes the work easy.
That's right.
And I think one of the things that we've struggled with in our clients over the years, our human service clients, this is where it's particularly a problem,
right,
is they can absolutely measure short-term impact that they have on an individual. Whether we're talking about, a homeless shelter and getting someone into a home, whether we're talking about getting somebody a higher reading level or even getting them to a GED,
right,
or getting them off some, substance abuse or a financial literacy or anything like that. Right. They're very good at measuring the impact while they have them, but they lack the commitment to longitudinal study effect. So if you go back and say, okay, 100% of the people who went through this program were off drugs when they walked out the door. But what's the 6-month, 12-month, 3-year, 5-year, rate? And did that actually, if the 100% of them are back on drugs in 9 months, it's not worth doing.
That's
or
right.
maybe it's worth doing. We prolonged their life 9 months, but but I don't see that commitment to.
It's a tough conversation, David.
And it's hard,
Yeah.
and I understand it. It's hard following someone for 5 years to see how they do, especially if you helped them through a part of their life they're trying to forget, is not an easy thing to do.
Point. It's a
but
very
it
good
is
point.
most definitely a missing piece of the data set beyond just, oh yeah, we got them from here to here.
That's right.
Well, did it really do anything?
How do we know?
Yeah.
How do we know? And the thing about big data, and the second, and I think Blackbaud, our the granddaddy of all technology, once we're able to translate big data into our sector, then like Randy said, the proof is going to be in the pudding, because how organizations raise money is one thing, but how the people that come through these programs end up, where they end up, how they use services, when they use services, the frequency in which they come back to the same service. I think what you're describing, come back to the same service provider. See, now with data analytics and big data, we're going to be able to tell that story pretty soon.
If we collect the data.
If we collect, right.
So
If we collect
one of the things
data.
that we found, I serve on the board of the Giving USA Foundation.
Yes. Oh.
So one of the challenges that we found just at the Giving USA Foundation, which is a philanthropically funded research project, is that donors will ask questions about that data could answer, and they would like to know the answers to those questions, but they don't want to fund what it costs to do that kind of research to get the answers.
Yes.
We have a great difficulty getting funders on board to expand what we're already doing at Giving USA. It's sort of like, they're like, good enough is good enough. This is great. We're like, yeah, but we could do so much more if it could be funded.
Maybe investment. Yes. Yeah. Oh my God. And you're right. We need an entire soapbox just
we have
on,
to do a whole nother session.
Just on, you're right. Because and I look at, I bring Blackbaud back up because of course they're a for-profit company,
right.
Now listed on the stock. But what I found is the cry for funding to support that type of work, the type of work that's critical that Giving USA is doing. It has to come from the foundation community. They have got to get behind this and say, it's important enough for us to know that our appropriation of funds is being done well, and in a transparent way. We're willing to say, check yes if we did a good job, check no if we did not.
And the interesting thing about it is we've seen more success, frankly, with for-profit entities funding nonprofit research. Bank of America funding their high net worth giving study. Fidelity just funded a project in Giving USA to look at revisions on some of our methodology and expanding what we do, because they now have a foot through the donor advised funds in the nonprofit sector.
Yeah.
And they want to be able to help their donor advised funds clients do a better job as philanthropists. So they're investing in data, but to a large degree, the private foundation world, there are certainly outliers, but for the most part, they haven't invested a lot in data.
That's a good point.
Well, I feel like we could do this all day.
Oh, absolutely.
And
yes.
I think we're going to have to do this again, and we'll have a pet peeve edition of Futures in Fundraising.
Let's do it, yes.
Where we go back and forth exchanging pet peeves.
We'll have 1 million listeners that day, David.
One of the things that we do with this podcast, and one of the reasons that we started it, though, is to try to give people who are in nonprofits, particularly in development careers, access to people who have been successful in that field, and to glean out some nuggets of advice that will help them build their career. So my last question for you is, for someone in working in development who wants to be successful in this field, what are some things that you think are important, either skills or habits or experiences that make people successful when they're working in development for nonprofits?
As a practitioner?
As a practitioner.
Oh, absolutely. They have to have the passion. You've got, like you said, you open with that you really have to love the industry that's not an industry because you're going to meet a lot of heart folks, and our industry is led by heart, and that's a great thing. But we ask for money from people that are not heart-led. They're data-led. They're financially led. And so I would say at the bare bones, you have to have passion. But the second thing that I would say to be successful in this industry is you have to understand your customer. And our customer, we have slow, in the nonprofit sector, there are slow sales cycles.
You're telling me.
I've had clients, literally, I've had people call me back 5 years ago, like, Q, I talked to you about 5. Are you kidding me? I've forgotten that you exist. But it's a slow sector. And to be successful, you've got to know that, and you've got to build your business around those that are willing to move. And third, not only are they slow, but they're also risk averse. And so when we talk about things like technology in my space, I mean, I'm the philanthropy evangelist, and I'm the technology evangelist in philanthropy. And most of the times people are like, girl, get out of here. I don't want to talk about that right now. I'm trying to raise my $500,000 budget so we can keep our doors open. And so understanding that our sector's risk averse means we've got to be really genteel in how we introduce new concepts. I really believe, Dave, and I know you agree, that things like crowdfunding and even as we talked about, using digital platforms to engage colleges and universities, it's still going to take us a while. It's going to take us a little while to be able, because the good old fashioned way has been working since Andrew Carnegie did it. So we're going to have to prove that there's a better way.
Well, there's a lot of talk about the increase in online giving, but most of that is just a payment vehicle.
It is. It's a website. You're right.
It's easier to go to the website and put it on my credit card than to write a check.
You're exactly
but the money's
right.
being solicited in the more traditional
The
way.
old-fashioned way. That's right.
Well, I want to thank you so much for being here today. It's been great fun.
I feel like I'm with my brother.
Ladies and gentlemen, that was Q Frasier, CEO of MyPledger. Be sure to join us again for the next episode of Futures in Fundraising.